Welcome back to our channel. On today's video, we're going to learn about Cortez, Florida, one of the last remaining fishing villages in the state and one of the most vulnerable historic sites that is currently in danger. Cortez, Florida is home to some of the most beautiful historic sites in the entire state of Florida, from its traditional fishing village homes, as well as the Florida Maritime Museum. There are truly few places like this left in the state of Florida. However, Cortez, Florida is one of the most vulnerable sites in the entire state. We saw how Hurricane Ian destroyed the beautiful fishing villages of San Carlos Island right outside of Fort Myers Beach. The shrimp boats that were on Fort Myers Beach were originally further south. However, with increasing real estate prices, they were forced to end up in San Carlos Island. This particular area of Fort Myers Beach was one of the most beloved sites in all of Southwest Florida, and Hurricane Ian destroyed every last bit of it. In 2023, we saw a storm surge in Bradenton, Florida, and in Cortez that left much of the historic homes underwater. Sadly, despite being an important historical site, home to historic homes, the Maritime Museum, the Coast Guard, and other essential maritime facilities, due to its low elevation, it only takes a couple feet of storm surge for Cortez, Florida to be completely underwater. But what can be done to address the preservation of this historical Florida town, as well as alleviate traffic congestion in the evenings as people leave the beaches? Traffic congestion becomes absolutely unbearable. There is a solution that could both save one of the most historic fishing villages in Florida, as well as eliminate or reduce significantly traffic going on and off the island. A new bridge would have to be constructed to go around the southern end of Cortez. This bridge would also act as a flood wall. Cortez Road would become a one-way, and it would also be elevated. On the water, a wall would be constructed with an opening that would close during the hurricanes. Thus, this would encase Cortez, protecting the town of Cortez and reducing traffic flow around one of the most congested areas in the entire state. But wouldn't that be an awful eyesore? Well, let's take a look at the Ringling Bridge that sits in downtown Sarasota, which is actually one of the most beautiful areas in the entire metropolitan area. On both sides of the bridge, you have beaches, parks, you even have space for businesses. For example, there is a bait shop. This creates opportunities for small businesses like restaurants, tour guides, opportunities for fishing bridges, and of course, kayak rentals. This structure would not be an eyesore to the small fishing village. It would actually be an infrastructure asset that would protect the city, beautify the area, create traffic flow reduction, and allow new positions to be opened for small businesses. The real estate value of these historic homes would shoot up dramatically. One of the largest problems that Cortez has is that despite being a beautiful historical site, it is incommunicated from the traffic flow. Most tourists pass by Cortez, Florida, but they will rarely get off and venture into this beautiful historic village. There's no space in the historic core of Cortez for new businesses or even parking spaces, creating somewhat of a traffic congestion even within Cortez and limited space. This project would incorporate Cortez into the economical benefits of Anna Maria Island, which is growing to be one of the biggest tourist attractions in the state. Not only would this project protect one of the most vulnerable fishing communities in Florida, but it would also generate opportunity for new businesses that will benefit the residents of Cortez, allowing for places for people to fish, parks, playgrounds, beachy sands, and other recreational areas that are much needed in an ever-congested coast of Manatee County. Eventually, Manatee County will face a hurricane like the one that destroyed Fort Myers, Florida. We can learn from what happened on Fort Myers Beach and protect the coast and valuable historical assets that are along the coast of Bradenton, Florida. If these assets are not protected, when a hurricane does come with a destructive force, historical sites like Cortez will most likely be completely eliminated by a storm surge. While this has not happened yet, it is definitely possible for a hurricane to destroy this area. And as we can see from the Ringling Bridge in downtown Sarasota, this does not have to be an eyesore of a structure. It can actually be a complement to the beauty of the area. Incorporating many of the structures that are already in place in the water, the still houses could also be protected, and they could become kind of a novelty as they'll be very close to the new bridge, allowing people to see the beauty of Cortez, not only from the land, but also from the water. Protecting Cortez could also create a safe area for rescue efforts and recovery in case a hurricane does create a storm surge that damages Anna Maria Island. It will create a place that could be used as a staging ground for those cleanup efforts. Until the invention of air conditioning in the 1960s, there were few people living in the state of Florida, and thus these few historical sites like Cortez are best preserved and saved. Tourism does not mean the destruction of old Florida. In fact, tourism could be the tool used to fund the efforts to preserve old Florida. Do you think that Cortez, Florida is a vulnerable historic site and that something needs to be done to save it? And not only that, to bring businesses to the area and incorporate them in a way that complements the natural beauty and current utilization of this area? I believe that this project could definitely help Cortez, Florida become a thriving historical village, as well as connecting Cortez to Anna Maria Island, which is a hub for tourism. This will create a bridge for people to walk and bike across, what will create a corridor of commerce between Cortez and Anna Maria Island, allowing more places for people to enjoy the natural beauty of the area. Any structures that will be added as attachments to this bridge and its project would also be in the old Florida style to complement the architecture of the current structures in place. Tell me what you guys think about this project. Does it make sense? Will it make Cortez a better place? And do you think if it's a good idea to create a way to preserve this historical site while creating great opportunities for everybody to enjoy the area? The coast of Bradenton is one of the most vulnerable sites in the entire state of Florida, and it holds some of the state's most important historical homes. We can learn from the destruction of Southwest Florida from Hurricane Ian that these types of areas are either going to be protected for the future or destroyed with a coming hurricane. While a lot of things can be done to save these vulnerable areas, the reality is that Manatee County is actually helping developers get rid of the current barriers that are in place to make sure that next time there's a hurricane, instead of protecting these valuable historical assets, they're actually more worried about protecting the interests of developers and getting rid of the mangrove barriers. There has to be a point where you combine natural beauty, the waterways, with growth. I think downtown Sarasota is a perfect example of how a place can preserve its natural beauty while accommodating the needs of a growing area. I personally saw what Hurricane Ian did to my hometowns in Naples and Fort Myers, and why I hope that this never happens in the Bradenton area. I know that many of the historical landmarks that were lost in Southwest Florida will never exist again. And after a hurricane like this, then development really comes into play, because you're going to have to start from scratch, and that's going to mean newer building codes. But unfortunately, Manatee County has taken the approach of continuing to take more and more risk and continue to build new homes without any preventive measures. In fact, they're stripping away the current preventions to make the area even more vulnerable instead of finding a solution to the current problems so they can preserve and protect the assets of Manatee County. They're actually looking to remove the current barriers like the mangroves. Hurricane Idalia wasn't much, and it's just about flooded Cortez, Florida. Recently, we had a cold front bring a storm surge to the area as well. Despite there being nothing but rich people's mansions, Collier County is actually considering making a wall on Wiggins Pass, Florida. Army Corps of Engineers is actually doing that to protect new mansions for the rich people, but they're not having any efforts to preserve a place like Cortez that is historical and cannot be recreated.